Welcome to Open Container. I'm Doug Schnitzspahn. I'm a journalist, writer, and overall lover of the outdoors. I've fought wildfires, reported on national politics, published magazines, and I know how to relieve a tension pneumothorax in the backcountry with a ballpoint pen and a condom. On this podcast, we're going to have an open conversation about culture, conservation, policy, business, issues that matter the most to the outdoor community. Let's get some. I started mountain biking in the late 1980s when the community was just beginning to evolve. My bike was a steel-framed giant iguana with no suspension, and you had to learn how to get in and out of the pedal clips as fast as possible. The first trail we rode in Middlesex Fells in Boston was visited more by drug users than bikers at the time. It was ridiculously rocky with broken glass scattered in many places. By all accounts, difficult to ride on that bike. I can't tell you how many rear derailleurs I broke and fixed in the field. But we loved it. We loved the pure joy of mountain biking, of doing something a little dumb on trails that weren't meant for it at the time, and we shared that joy. The band of riders I joined didn't have fancy equipment or high-end gear, but we had fun together. I didn't even own a car then, so I'd bike from my apartment in Boston, riding the same iguana I used to commute to my bartending job downtown. What mattered wasn't the gear or the trails, but the community, the ability to get out together and enjoy these places. In all the years I've spent mountain biking since, that's what still matters most to me. Yes, my bike is much better now. 29-inch wheels, suspension, dropper post, electronic shifting. The ride is easier, and dedicated trails in places like Fruita or Bentonville make mountain biking more accessible. But the heart of it is still the same. The people you ride with, the laughs, the way you push each other. That's what mountain biking is at its core. Unfortunately, not all the trails we take for granted are open to everyone. My friend Berne Broudy, who helped develop the trail system in Franklin, Vermont, discovered this when she went riding with her friend Greg Durso, who was paralyzed in an accident. Greg just wanted to get out and ride, but the bridges and water crossings, normally no problem for Berne and her friends, were too narrow for his adaptive cycle by just a few inches. They helped him across, but it bummed everyone out. Not because Greg was an adaptive cyclist, but because the trails made it harder for the group to simply ride together. They soon learned adaptive cyclists face many challenges, fitting through trail gates, navigating bridges, even just unloading from a car. So they decided to change things. They brought the community together to design a new trail system called the driving range, built for both adaptive and non-adaptive riders. The idea was simple but powerful. Build trails so everyone could ride together. I love this story because it shows, again, what really matters in mountain biking and in so many outdoor communities. It's not just about chasing crazy challenges, though those can be fun. It's about being together, finding the thrill of single track side by side, and knowing that when you show up at the trailhead, you share something maybe a little outside the bounds of normal society, but deeply meaningful, especially compared to all the noise in the world right now. And adaptive sports are showing us this unification of community in so many different ways. My home ski mountain, Eldora, just outside Boulder, just partnered with Ignite Adaptive Sports to open a brand new 12,000 square foot, multi-million-dollar facility on the slopes. I've also admired the work of Paradox Sports, co-founded by climber Timmy O'Neill, mountaineer Malcolm Daly, and vet DJ Skeleton, which has brought so many climbers to crags they would have trouble accessing otherwise, and introduced new adaptive athletes to the rock. One of my favorite things to see on a ski mountain is blind skiers, not just because of the impressive achievement itself, but because of the partnership. Someone skiing with them, calling out turns, sharing the run. Adaptive sports aren't just for disabled athletes. They're about community, the volunteers, the organizations, and the friends who come together to make it possible. Not only did Berne and Greg, along with director Ben Knight, create the driving range trails in Vermont, they also made a film about the experience called Best Day Ever, along with adaptive athlete Ali Bianchi. I love that title because when Greg was asked about the day he was paralyzed, he said it gave him a chance to see life again in a new way. That's a lesson for all of us. Misfortune can transform us, opening us up to new possibilities and deeper strength. And the outdoors is one of the best places to learn that lesson, just by getting out and riding with friends. As the psychologist Viktor Frankl, who survived concentration camps and reframed his suffering into a philosophy of meaning, famously said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." Whatever challenges we face, that idea finds its fullest expression when we meet them outside in our own way. I'm so happy to have Berne Broudy and Greg Durso on the show today to talk more about Best Day Ever, the trails they built, and the power of community.
My name is Berne Broudy. I'm a writer, I'm a director and a producer, and I've cooked over 5,000 hot dogs in the last 3 years.
I'm Greg Durso. I'm the Senior Program Director of the Kelly Brush Foundation, an adaptive athlete, ex-gymnast, Ironman finisher, and I hate long walks on the beach.
So let's open the container with Berne Broudy and Greg Durso. So the film is called Best Day Ever. It's an amazing film. I really enjoyed it. Berne, you encouraged me to put it on big screen TV, which is definitely the way to have it, just to see how these trails run and see the adaptive bikes in them was great. But the basic question is, why is it Best Day Ever? How did that name resonate with you? And how do you hope it resonates with audiences?
Greg told me that the day he got injured was the best day ever. And he said that that was the day that changed his life and gave him direction and opened up the opportunities for him to be the person that he is today. And Greg is somebody who is a true leader in the world of adaptive sports. He's an incredible mentor to so many people who have had spinal cord injuries. He runs camps for kids who are recently injured. He travels all over the United States. He travels all over the world to both teach people what's possible, people who have had spinal cord injuries, and also to help build infrastructure of all kinds, not just around mountain biking, to make the world a better place for somebody who is in a wheelchair.
Yeah, I think after my injury, I only knew how to be myself. And I think that's kind of what I took to kind of move like each day past. And I think when I look back on how I live my life, I just try to make every day like, kind of the best day I've ever had, and kind of live that way. And I knew, right, like I had my injury and I knew for that day I was going to be in a wheelchair and I had to focus on that day. And that was that. And the next day I'll worry about that when it comes. But for the moment in time, like that's what I had to do and that's what I had to learn. And I think I kept it that way. And that kind of helped me, build myself up to where I am now, 17 or 16 years later after my injury in 2009. So I just really want to have a smile on my face as long as I can.
I love that, Greg. That inspires me too. I know it's similar to like fuck cancer, right? Been dealing with that. It's kind of this idea of it's like, this isn't going to stop me or slow me down in some way. I'm going to continue being myself and continue being a evolving version of myself as I go down this journey.
Yeah, exactly. I just knew how to be me. And I was like, whatever that's going to do now in a wheelchair, I'll figure that out. And I'll just keep on moving. Well, I guess rolling instead now. So yeah.
And you were in a adaptive mountain bike almost as soon as you were out of the hospital, right? You were on one right away.
I wish. When I first got out of the hospital, I learned that there was like hand cycles. I didn't know these things existed, right? I think you're so naive to the disability world, especially the spinal cord injury world, when after you get hurt and you kind of have no idea. I think everyone kind of has this like, I would say negative connotation, but naiveness to what's out there, what you can do. And I think you kind of look down on people sometimes, whether you really don't realize you're looking down on them or not, you kind of have that. And I just didn't know enough. And I think I remember getting out of the hospital saying, you'll never see me, with a bunch of wheelchair people in a minivan, like coming out of it. And now I would say, how many people can we fit in that minivan with wheelchairs, and how many people can we get coming out of that minivan? And luckily, someone had showed me what a hand cycle was, and I was able to kind of purchase a beginner one. I set my goal by the end of the summer to meet Kelly Brush, who started this foundation that my aunt had heard about up in Vermont. And I was going to ride 20 miles, and that kind of changed my entire trajectory of my life after my injury.
And before too long, like Greg ran the Boston Marathon. I saw a hilarious interview when we were making the movie where the interviewer was like, "Hey man, how does it feel to finish last?" And it was so clear that this guy missed the point. Sadly, they wouldn't let us use the footage because it was quite entertaining. But
yeah, the funny part of that story was, I think I was in a year and a half of 2 years of my injury, and I learned how to use a racing chair, which is especially what we use to go running in, you would say. And I had like 6 weeks of time to train myself to do this and learn it. And I was so slow that I was pretty much like dead last in the wheelchair division, the Boston Marathon. And the guy actually thought that I had won because of the time difference between everyone had finished to when I came across the finish line. So when he went to interview me, he's like, "What does it feel like to come in first?" And I was like, "Actually, no, I'm pretty sure I came dead last." And then he was kind of like, "What does it feel like to be a loser?" And I said, it doesn't feel that great, actually. So but I was happy to finish. And that's all that mattered to me in the moment.
Well, the film's going to be touring around at a bunch of festivals. So when people connect to the idea of this being the best day ever, what is it you want them to walk away with after they leave watching this film?
I think like two things is really important. I think one is that like the adaptive community is quite resilient. And I think given the connotation that you don't have to feel bad for people with disability, like we just want to be normal, and like we're just out there like the rest of you, and we want to just have those same experiences and opportunities that you have. And it's very, very possible to have that. And on the other end of that, like into the actual adaptive mountain biking side, is that we don't need trails dumbed down. I think people associate a lot of stuff with ADA and law and that stuff, and it's not just some paved pathway that we're trying to make. We're trying to make legitimate mountain bike trails that everyone can go down. And the beauty of it is you would never actually know whether it's an adaptive trail or a regular trail. It really is just a mountain bike trail, and that's all there is to it.
I love that aspect of the trails and of the film. And I think when Berne wrote a story for me for Elevation Outdoors magazine real early on, and there's such a great photo of it where I think it's maybe you. There's someone Berne's nodding her head. Yes. Yeah. There's you in the adaptive bike, and then there's someone in the air on another bike, and you guys are there together. I think that really shows how these trails are, like, as you said, they're not some easy, okay, this is the easy trail, but they're trails that everyone can enjoy together and find challenge on and really find joy on.
Yeah, and I think the other parts of that too is just that we really wanted to keep it lighthearted, and it's not really about Allie and I and how our injuries affected us and how deep and what that means to us, but more just that there's so much more to life than just those moments, right? There's so many more of that, and creating a community and being with the community is so important. Having that realization, and so I think having all that together and being on the trail with like one of my best friends, who's the one above me, in the air in his horrible form, which we get to make fun of him for each time, which is just great. It makes it that much better, right? So we're all learning and progressing out there together, and that's like the best part of all of this.
And I want to say absolutely to everything that Greg said. Like, so much of that was really just the foundation of the project and also of the movie. What I hope that when people watch this movie, it changes how they look at someone who's in a wheelchair. Like, I believe that this project could actually change culture. I'm hoping we can not just get a lot of people to see the movie, but also to think about what's going on in their own communities and how they can impact what's happening with recreation in their own communities and open up opportunities for other people. But so far, people watch the movie and they're just like, wow, I had no idea about, like, I just didn't even understand that, like, it just changes their perspective on disability, which is really cool. I feel like I wish we could come up with a different name for it. It feels like the wrong word to call it disabled, because when, like, Greg just rides a bike differently than I ride a bike.
Right.
but he's a really, really good rider.
I think there's this really powerful part it's in near the beginning of the film, Greg, when you tell people to think about what they say before they say it out loud. And I wonder what you'd like to say to people about adaptive cycling, about the driving range trails, about the way you find joy out on the trails that might make them think more about your experience before they say something in that way.
Yeah, I find these sayings so funny, and they're almost kind of like backhanded compliments. Something I kind of say in the movie of like, I'm so glad this happened to you and didn't happen to me. I don't know what I would do, and you're kind of just like, that doesn't really make much sense if you actually think about that. But
That's
I
horrible.
understand. I understand, but that's really probably not the right way to say that. But I think the point is that like anyone can be in this situation, and there's ways out. I mean, you can choose the path you want to go on, but the fact there's opportunity and there's community and there's experiences you can have that all exists. And so I think it's just opening up people's minds to what's really there. And with anything in life, like it's just kind of education and learning, and you just don't know what you don't know. And so it's really nice to be able to show another side of mountain biking and adaptive mountain biking and what it looks like and what we can do out there and how we can build, this community and build these trails and build a life for yourself around what this looks like for you. And it's just kind of taking those people and just kind of ushering them a little bit to open up their mind a little bit more, and being like, you could go through this too and you'd be just fine.
And you can have a role in creating experiences for others. Like that's, I didn't come to this project with someone in my family who was disabled, or like my best friend was disabled. Greg and I met, and I was just like, this is kind of stupid and we should fix this problem. And
the stupid thing, I think, if I know from the book and reading some stories about it too, was that you guys had to carry Greg over some bridges when you guys were mountain biking together, right? Every bridge you hit, you had to carry him over
but it was
everyone.
but through this project, I just saw, like, I really understood for the first time, like, the bias against people with disabilities, and just how we, and I even, just thought about people who I didn't even know, like just made assumptions or like didn't bother to ask questions. And so again, like it was really cool to see the community in Vermont come together, and also to just watch those barriers dissolve when we could all be out riding together. And to hear people say, like, I'll never forget, like someone told me a story of their friend skipping the grand opening of the driving range trails because he's like, oh, those are those adaptive trails, right? Yeah, I'm not going to go to ride those trails. And then, a couple weeks later rode the trails and was like, holy shit, those trails are fun and they're hard,
Hey, everyone. I want to thank you for listening to Open Container and ask that you please subscribe to the show by clicking follow on the podcast app you're using right now. Following the podcast is the best way to ensure that we will continue to crack open the container every single week. And make sure you stick around to the end for the last drop. Thanks, and let's get back to the show. Well, someone tries the adaptive bike in the beginning of the movie too, right? And they're like, geez, this thing is, it's like a luge, right? It's kind of scary to get on.
Yeah. And I think to me, like one of the most important parts of how we were building the driving range, what it looked like was putting Tom, our amazing trail builder, in the bikes, because if, I'm kind of telling him like what it looks like and this is how it moves and you're seeing it on trail, but like, unless you're in it and you experience it yourself and understand it, that's just so much more important. So for him to ride like the bike on his own trails, and understand why he's creating these berms differently or creating these obstacles differently or
right.
sloping the trail differently is so important. So he understands it. And then the outcome really was, it made the trails better for everybody that was out there. It really wasn't just, to be adaptive and for us and the chairs and us adaptive bikes. It truly made the trails better for everyone. And I kind of go on these assessments now and everyone keeps saying that, like, we're making these little changes. And they are like little changes here and there, and it's making the trail that much better for everyone to ride it. And like, that's really huge. And I was just up at a conference in Quebec, and we told someone presenting about what we did, and this person had just ridden there, and he literally had no idea that they were built for adaptive bikes. He was like, I had no idea that. And like,
That's
that is
awesome.
the best answer you could ever give.
Well, one of the things I love about this project is that you haven't just built adaptive trails, but I believe you're also giving other groups kind of the blueprint to be able to do the same. So, can you guys tell us a bit about how this is just the beginning and how this effort's going to grow through what you started there in Vermont?
Yeah. So obviously we built the trails. We didn't really know exactly what we're getting into, but we managed to build this really cool trail system that, as far as we know, is the first fully adaptive trail system anywhere. And just to clarify, they're not the first adaptive trails. There are a lot of adaptive trails. In Vermont, we've got over 100 miles of adaptive trails. Bentonville has great adaptive trails. There's adaptive trails in many places. But the cool thing about having a whole network is that everybody can just go out together and ride, and somebody who's on an adaptive bike knows what they're getting into and knows before they go down a trail if it's going to go, if it's going to work for them. So it gives everybody a lot more independence and just more ability to just be together as friends. Watching kids, we had like the reason this trail network got built is we had over 200 volunteers come out and put in somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 hours of their time over 3 years, just moving dirt, moving rocks, moving dirt again, like figuring it out. We had a bunch of kids come out, particularly teenage boys. First couple trail days, like they didn't really interact with Greg. They didn't really talk to other adaptive riders who were also there volunteering. But like 2 trail days later, everybody's riding together. Everybody's hitting features together. They're like, Greg, can you do this? I think you should do this line. And Greg's like, you should try that line. And now like everybody just became friends. So that was such a cool piece of it. And that is really, for me, what inspired this movie. And now we have this movie that hopefully will, again, change people's perspectives on just on others in their community. We built this cool network in Vermont. We're hoping to work with grassroots clubs across the United States to assess and retrofit their trails, something that Greg has been working really hard on in Vermont, along with VIMBA and Vermont Adaptive. As part of this movie, we made a series of 3 videos on how to build adaptive trails that are free on YouTube, and that hopefully just start to raise awareness for folks of like what adaptive trails look like and what they might be able to do in their own communities. And then, if we can raise the money, we'd love to build more adaptive trail networks in other places in the US to serve as teaching and learning centers so that more people can go and understand like what the subtleties are of building trails to be adaptive optimized, and then take that knowledge back to their communities and build trails in their communities.
Yeah, and I'm lucky enough to work for the Kelly Brush Foundation, which is a national organization that helps people with spinal cord injuries, live their best active lifestyles by providing grants for adaptive sports equipment and creating unique experiences. And so I've realized that, we have these partnerships with other adaptive programs around the country, and to create real change as these nonprofits is to work with other mainstream organizations to create that. You need that buy-in. And so just to see what we're able to do here with all of our communities and or the organizations and kind of give this blueprint of what you can do and give that knowledge and how it works, because it's just hard to get started. You need to start someplace, and sometimes you just don't know where to start. And we have all these amazing communities and all these other grant recipients that around the country in the adaptive community that I know want this. And, especially when that trail series came out about how to build adaptive trails, I was just getting feedback from people in the industry that I never thought I'd actually hear from, or how excited they were to hear that someone was starting that. And I think it's hard because there's sometimes no right answer to how to fix this stuff, but you have to start somewhere to do it, and kind of pioneer that path. And then by no way do we mean to be like the first person to do this. We didn't do it to be the first one, right? We did it because it was a problem. We wanted to solve something in the community. That was a big deal to us, and it solved that problem. And I think Spencer, who's like, I think he's like 12 years old in the movie at the time, sums it up by saying that if something ever happened to him and no one was making an effort to fix what he loves to do it, like that would be a problem. And it's as simple as that, hearing that, and it goes a long way and reverberates around. And I'm just happy to be a part of this and see what we can do to create real change.
And what I love about watching the movie is there's so much joy in it, and there's so much community, and there's so much community joy. When you watch this film, I think everyone, as you said, no, it's not focusing on some tragedy happening or how it's so hard. Instead, it's focusing on bringing everyone together, building trails, having fun, riding together. How is your community in general even tighter now after building the system and figuring it out?
It's truly been a whirlwind. I don't think I realized the support we would have or get. I think, someone that's obviously has this disability and lives in a chair, I think you're in the weeds so much and you're kind of used to how like the ho-hum things go and what people say. And this was such a cool opportunity to blow people's minds a little bit. And it worked. And the community really like wrapped its heads around it. I think the mountain bike community has been one of the most respectful and inclusive communities that I've ever been a part of. And between skiing and triathlons and marathoning and all those other stuff and communities you're part of, they really accepted this and coming together and wanting them to help us build this and understand that it was actually better for them too in some ways and have that knowledge it's just been so incredible. And I always kind of get pretty emotional when I talk about it because it means so much to me in our community and what that stands for to have that help. We just don't have that all the time. So just to feel that support is just so overwhelmingly positive. And that's all I ever want for people. And all I want to do is create that change and get people the same chances and opportunities that I've had and to create those communities because it's changed my life. And I wouldn't be here doing the things that I'm doing without that support sometimes. And so having that community and building that has just been the most important thing. I think I've always wanted a group text message of adaptive riders. I could go text and say, let's go ride together because you has to be one person. You have to find your like 8 other friends to come help
Right.
you and spot you on the trail. And now the 4 of us, 5 of us, 7 of us now in this group message, all text, we show up at the trailhead and we go ride. I never thought like that would be a thing, to be honest with you. And just so having that, like that little win is all that matters.
Well, I love the work that both of you have done, not just on the physical level, creating these trails and creative film, but just this kind of mental work too of changing the whole paradigm of thinking about adaptive sports and how people do it. Now, can you give us the nuts and bolts? Let people know how they can see the film, how they can, contact you to find out about the trails, how they can donate to the trails, how they can talk to Kelly Brush Foundation, how you can get a adaptive cycle. There's a lot of details I think we can give people.
I'll start with the movie and then pass it to Greg. So, the best way to learn more about the movie is at our website, bestdayever.mov. We're also on Instagram at bestdayevermovie, and we have a Facebook page also. We'll post all the places that we'll be screening. We're premiering at the Heartland International Film Festival in Indianapolis, Indiana on October 17th. And if you're anywhere near Indiana, please come. And if you're not, there's an option to buy a virtual ticket to watch the movie. I think it's $15. And we will be at Banff Mountain Film Festival. That will be in early November. We don't know the exact date yet, but if you keep an eye on the website, you'll learn more about that and all the other screenings in Vermont and across the US and across Canada, maybe across the world. Who knows?
Good.
Yeah. And for anything, Greg or Kelly Brush, please go to the kellybrushfoundation.org. We're on our website to learn about who we are, what we do, how you can be involved, and kind of just understand like all this awesomeness that we're able to create as an amazing foundation with just 10 of us in Vermont with a national presence. And we've been able to do so much. I think we've given out over $6 million to over 2,000 people for adaptive sports grants and experiences. So it's really cool what we've been able to do. And we just want to keep growing and showing that there's so much more access to recreation out there, even beyond mountain biking. So it's all out there. And I'd love to talk to anybody about it anytime. I love what I do so much.
I have one final question for both of you, and Berne, we'll start with you. Same question for both, and it's the question we end the show on every time. It is simply, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is the 200 volunteers that came out at the driving range, and particularly the kids. Like, the kids are what really took this project to the next level for me.
And I think for me, what gives me hope is how amazing our adaptive community really is and how amazing the communities around the driving range in Vermont has supported adaptive mountain biking and adaptive sport in all. And it's amazing to see how it's reflected across, the nation. And even just being in Nepal 2 weeks ago, what adaptive sport translates to, and it's kind of a language, right? You can't understand, but having that language together and creating real change is amazing. So I'm just hopeful for all the amazing changes we can hopefully make the adaptive community and adaptive sports.
And now, the last drop. If you want to see an adaptive skier really getting after it, go to YouTube and search for Trevor Kennison dropping into Corbett's Couloir in Jackson Hole during the famed Kings and Queens competition. He says, "The interesting thing about Corbett's is that everyone is dealing with the same variables and conditions, and everyone is going to look and ride a little bit differently. And man, does he show how it's done." Thanks for imbibing Open Container, production of Rockfight LLC. Please take a second to follow our show on whatever podcast app you're listening to us on, and send your emails and feedback to myrockfight@gmail.com. To learn more about the film Best Day Ever, head to bestdayever.mov. Our producers today were David Karstad and Colin True. Art direction provided by Sarah Gensert. I'm Doug Schnitzspahn. Get some. Thanks for listening.